We're moving on now to the root causes and deep drivers of the turbulence. We have a video message from Ketan Patel, who's a trustee of the World Academy and also the CEO of Greater Pacific Capital and the founder of Force for Good, after which we will go into a discussion with a moderator and two panelists who I will introduce straight after the video.
Hello, I'm pleased to be with you. I'm Ketan Patel. I'm a member of the leadership team of the World Academy of Art and Science. Apologies, I cannot be there in person. I also chair something called Force for Good, which works on the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals from the perspective of finance and technology and solutions that might be rolled out across the world. It's of vital interest to us to look at what are the sources of these solutions and what would it actually take to roll them out across the world. I'm also an investor and the founder CEO of Greater Pacific Capital. Today, I'm going to look at global turbulence and the root causes and drivers in a very short presentation, and I know that you will be having a discussion on this shortly afterwards. The first part of my presentation really focuses on what are the contours of today's rapidly changing world. And I think we all know as we look at the news, listen to any form of media or watch it, that there is an accelerated disintegration of the current world order. The world issues require urgent attention and leadership and resources, and this is missing. That the world is split into nations with might and those without might, those without the power really to exert their influence. America's leaders see the need to extract value from the world at this stage. They feel as if this has been an unequal, unfair relationship. They see allies now as counterparties, and there's extreme rivalry with competitors. American might vulnerabilities will be tested in the process of testing others, of course. The world is tending towards spheres of influence and new alliances. Alliances to see if they can somehow rebalance this might that has been used in such a forceful manner. Wars remain unsolved, with solutions that might actually result in wars again in the not too distant future. Economic inequality, a key driver of the populism and extreme forms of government that we're seeing all over the world today, is probably set to continue unless these issues are addressed. And technology supremacy, which has become central to military and economic power, is of course part of the solution too. Now, what are the root causes and drivers that lead us to a place like this? At a point in time when we are probably at the peak of our scientific achievement, of our reach across the planet, of our ability to even escape the boundaries of this planet and go elsewhere. Our chance to actually solve every problem that we've ever faced is probably somewhere within our grasp. But it seems as if we are in a form of disintegration, fragmentation, and conflict, instead of seeking to reach the next platform. It may be that this is just a transition phase. And a lot of our work at Force for Good looks at the transition itself between an industrial era, our past, and an information-based era, our future. And this transition is a natural transition that happens in such a big changing of really a civilizational nature. I'm going to look at the root causes in four broad categories: socioeconomic, governance, and technological. These are intermingled in what I'm about to tell you, though. The first I'm going to focus on is the failure of socioeconomic policies to deliver prosperity and meaningful inclusion to the working classes. This is probably one of the foundational failures of our times. Second is the failure to identify and protect the public or arm them for self-protection against misinformation. This, coupled with the former, means that society itself is much weakened. That, combined with another root cause, another driver, is fragile governance structures that are unable to withstand the geopolitical, social, and technological changes that they find an assault on the system in some ways. And this leads to the inability of democratic systems to evolve. And this is a core driver or root cause of our times, that the democracies that have given so much advantage and spread so much good across the world find it very difficult to respond in the face of this level of change. There is, of course, also a weakening of national sovereignty and a shifting of power from nations to corporates and financial markets, weakening state control and the ability of the state to actually govern well. Another driver is weak governance and the oversight of money and markets and market economies, leading to extreme inequalities and systemic imbalances. This, coupled with an inadequate strength of global governance to ensure that the benefits of advancements are shared equitably across society and between countries, leads, of course, to many of the problems that we highlighted earlier. And then there is a neglect in addressing disruptive social and economic impacts of technologies such as automation, AI, robotics. And that is a fundamental disruption of all times. But as our advancement increases, it becomes even more important as a root cause that explains some of the inequities we might see within countries and across boundaries. And then if I draw a few more together, that form the basis of what I think are the most important root causes. Inadequate regulation to prevent weaponization of media and technology, leading to disruption of societal norms, espionage, of course, election manipulation, but all manners of disruption across society and between societies. A weakening of the global social values due to rising uncertainty, insecurity, intercultural tensions, such that we are fragmented. And this is an important root cause that explains some of the dissatisfaction, the uncertainty, the seeking of more radical solutions. And then a lack of integration of environmental sustainability into economic and political decision making, making in some cases environmental sustainability part of the problem as far as the public are concerned, propelled by some of the other root causes that I highlighted earlier. And then finally, a failure to maintain global institutions' legitimacy, the trust and authority, leading to resistance to modernization, to change, to sharing in solving world issues. These are 12 of the root causes and drivers that we found were perhaps fundamental reasons for the disruptions that we see today. All of these, I would say on a positive front, are addressable, but they require an extraordinary amount of effort given it's taken decades to build up to today's situation. It would take enormous shared responsibility, a new framework for making decisions to determine how we might move forward from these very fundamental changes that are being wrought on society. Thank you very much, and I wish I could be with you to continue this discussion. Thank you.
We'd like to now turn over to the panel moderator for our next session, Isabella Bunn, who's an international lawyer and a policy advisor based at Oxford University. She'll be joined by panelists Francis O'Donnell, a former international diplomat and president of the Genealogy Society of Ireland, and Lawrence Ford, founder and CEO of the Conscious Capital Foundation. Isabella?
Thank you very much. And speaking of commotion and disruption and turbulence, I'm joining you from a hotel on the edge of Grand Central Station in the middle of Manhattan. So you can hardly pick a more turbulent place than this. Adding to the turbulence, I'm here for meetings both with the global legal profession as well as with United Nations officials. So believe me, they are too dealing with the very questions we're discussing today. And I know that through the good offices of the World Academy, those insights will also be shared with that community, both the lawyers and the diplomats. And in terms of what Ketan said, absolutely, the governance questions at every level, whether it's global governance, multilateral questions, whether it's economic governance, whether it's also the implications of the overlay of AI governance and how it's transforming all the other ways we think about governance and integrity and accountability. And also, you'll be very glad to know a deep concern for the next generation of professionals, whether that's in public service, in the diplomatic corps, in legal services, corporate counsel, the list goes on and on. So I think there's a real alignment across the professions here. So it is a voice of assurance, I would have to say, in the middle of all this turbulence. And I'm really grateful for the way that Ketan framed it, because we could sort of join on to that. Now, I know we're talking about root causes and global turbulence and those related challenges, but I have to share with you something that Gary mentioned yesterday as we were having a preparatory call, because I found it so inspirational. And that is the core purpose of this gathering of the World Academy, of seeking trusted collaborations across the academic community and the policy communities. The vision for a transformative global social movement to create solutions for the benefit of all humanity. Now, that is inspirational, and that is a remarkable ambition. And it's humbling that we are having this conversation to try to contribute to that vision. But it is certainly something that personally motivates me, and I'm delighted that there is this shared endeavor among the people on this call, the people listening on this call, their deep intellects, their deep commitments, and also, it has to be said, the way they are rethinking many of their own activities in light of not just historic turbulence, but literally the headlines in today's papers and on the news. So I admire all of you, and I'm so glad that we can unite in this way and make those kinds of conversations. But there are two people I would love to introduce now to share their views on some of these questions. First is Ambassador Francis O'Donnell. Now, he'll explain that he is a citizen of Ireland, but I have to tell you, yes, that may be true, but he's also a citizen of the world with a remarkable record in United Nations affairs and various institutions, including the Order of Malta, with expertise in governance and in peacekeeping, and really following uncharted paths, which takes both bravery and commitment and imagination to try to create new scenarios and also ensure enduring results. And it goes back to this question of the benefit of humanity. So I'm going to call you Francis, but Ambassador O'Donnell, we would love to hear some of your views, and literally not just your intellectual reflections, but perhaps one or two examples, well, from the coalface of humanity working on those very, very difficult circumstances that you have made a center of your own career.
Well, thank you very much, Isabella. Do you hear me? Yes, I think so. Okay, please call me Frank, as my friends do. I don't know where you got all of that insight into my background. It might be actually undeserved in many measures. But for those who may be listening in and are not the recipients of the communications to this panel, I have shared with the panel by email my take on the root causes or factors and well, let's say the root causes and the deep drivers of global turbulence. Now, I'm sort of on the internet. You can find me as Francis Martin O'Donnell, and I will post up on Academia EDU later today under my profile there these particular points. So I'm not going to dwell on them now, because I think that the previous speakers have really shown an enormous degree of commonality in terms of their perception of the challenges that we face, the root causes, the drivers, and indeed a lot of what we have to look forward to as a challenge. Let me just say this. This is for us, not just as a community of globalists, and I usually say that proudly rather than pejoratively. It's an existential moment for multilateralism, as well as in the wider sense for this species in facing extinction. But for multilateralism, And nothing brought this home to me as much 11 years ago as when one of the P5 countries tried to gobble up a neighbor when Vladimir Putin's Russia attacked Ukraine. I had served in Ukraine for the last 5 years of my career as the resident coordinator, and I was absolutely stunned in 2014 when this happened. I couldn't believe that it was even possible. But things have only got worse since then, both in that theater of operations, but also globally. And the second thing that really struck me like a bombshell was to hear that the American delegation to the UN General Assembly not only was advancing the usual, at this stage, Trumpist rhetoric, but roundly denounced Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. This is such a fundamental shock to everything that we have been talking about, that really, if we don't recognize this right now and deal with it, we will live to regret it if we live at all. And the problem is that I mean, Gary spoke about 2015, when, of course, we came up to the second phase of what had actually started in the Millennium Declaration in the year 2000, which was to come up with Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, replacing the Millennium Development Goals. So I read with great interest the concept paper which was put together for this discussion, and I have to congratulate the author or authors, whoever they are, on an extraordinary degree of perspicacious observation that the Agenda 2030 basically has met with increasing resistance and obstacles to realization. The world community lacks essential requirements to deal with this stupendous collective endeavor. A comprehensive integrated theoretical framework is missing. The knowledge of how to consciously guide, manage, and lead a coordinated process. The means to develop the leadership expertise and the capacity to direct all of this. It couldn't have been said more succinctly. So I think that is absolutely the challenge that we're facing now. In my reflections on this, let me just say that a couple of years ago, after many years of participating in the Global Baku Forum, where I was delighted to meet Amanda Ellis on one occasion, as well as Gary Jacobs and others, I tried to pull all of this together 2 years ago and presented a paper to the Interaction Council of former leaders in Valletta in 2023. And this paper was called Desperate Hope, or if you wish, the subtitle was Reflections on Survival Pathways for Civilization. And I tried to struggle with all of these issues in terms of the following main clusters of causes and drivers: geopolitical and security failures, environmental and resource crises, governance and institutional deficiencies, and socioeconomic and ethical disparities, which others have already touched on. Now, where do we go from here? I think that we are facing the immediate degradation of the United Nations system as the core foundation of multilateralism in our world. Because not only has America denounced the SDGs and Agenda 2030, but this DOGE business, Doge for want of a better thing, is now sneaking its way towards the UN with Doge UN. And there's different ways to look at that. But I mean, I'm hoping that certainly if Vuk Jeremic is really committed still to the multilateralism as he was as a former president of the General Assembly, that this is going to try and outflank the Elon Musk Doge and outflank Trumpism and try and arrogate or co-opt to the same sort of discourse, but to reinforce and strengthen the UN rather than to undermine it. And we all agree the system needs radical reform. But it's not the kind of reform that you achieve by immediately discarding tens of thousands of UN staff, employees, and subcontractors and NGOs. This is demonic. To do this is demonic. It is going to absolutely unravel the whole, I would say, vocational commitment that people have to that kind of an institution. So we have to do something fast and effective to save the UN from imminent institutional collapse, instead of actually strengthening it. Now, I had a very interesting discussion about just 2 weeks ago with Tatiana Valavaya, who's the Director General of the UN in Geneva. And I was talking to her about these things. I said, well, knowing she's Russian and so on, I said, what do you think about all of this? And she said, well, we have to let some things go, more or less. I'm paraphrasing. These are not her exact words. But what she wanted to see was far more support and resources for the core functions of the United Nations, at the foundation of which is the desire to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. So if we cannot actually deal with that, and we have been failing miserably since 1945 and 46, with a plethora of wars across the planet, but thankfully no world war. But what have we got happening now? We have India and Pakistan threatening each other in a very dangerous discourse, as well as no effective end to the war in Ukraine, let alone in Gaza, and so on. So I think we really have to do something to support the UN. And I have been asked on occasion by people, what do I think are the two most important things to be doing? It's a little bit like, when Jesus was asked, what are the basic two commandments? Love God and love your neighbor. Well, I would have said, fight corruption and empower civil society. Because I think if we do these two things, a lot of the other things that we want to see achieved will follow through. But I would add to those today, because technology is moving forward, we need to try and use artificial intelligence to fast track us towards, creative solutions for the future, to fast track us towards effective analysis of global problems. And it is quite effective in doing this. It's just a question of, if you ask the right questions, what kind of an answer do you get? So it gets back to this question of framing. And I've seen in the comments the positive remarks that were made about the framing of the issues by others. I think if we can frame the challenge for artificial intelligence to help us, as it were, accelerate and fast track some of the analysis and solutions, it would be very good. And of course, this gets back to something I've been thinking about for a while, which is that we need, early warning systems that 25 years ago I was involved in New York with the UN. They've all failed because they never really managed to trigger a political decision that would have prevented a crisis from emerging, by and large. So we need to look at early warning systems and the linkage to political integrity and political decision-making in order that responsible things are happening. The digital giants, with their control and mastery of information, data, have an enormously important role to play in helping us to build capacities for strategic oversight and actually envisaging what needs to be done. But I would also say, just to close this off, because a comment had been made about the superpowers and these large giants who are determining how we should be. I mean, the large powers. The role of the middle powers is very important, because as individual small countries, they may have not much influence, but when they come together in coalitions and in regional associations or organizations, the rest of the world should actually be governing the show. And it should not be up to the United States, nor to China, nor to Russia, nor to any of the other big players to determine how we live our lives, how we save our planet, and how we move forward. We should have the whole community of member states coming forth through the effective alliance and coalitions of other countries. And most important in all of this is to advance the role of women in leadership, because I feel very much, and this is not to be tokenistic about this, but the paradigm of male chauvinist domination that has governed this planet since a long time, I won't even say when, but this is a bankrupt paradigm. We have to have a different type of emotional, intellectual, and I would say serious, compassionate commitment to preserving our species and saving our society. So I'll stop there. I tend to be a bit too loquacious, being Irish, Isabella, but then, what can I do about it? Not much. Thank you.
Frank, thank you so much that you brought out the individual aspects and the institutional aspects, and indeed the existential aspects of the situation in which we now find ourselves and the problems that we're trying to address. And so, speaking of fast track, I'm going to fast track over to our next speaker and introduce Lawrence Ford. So Lawrence is the founder and CEO of Conscious Capital, which means that he cares about the future and he cares about what capital can do to create a favorable future. And he works at the intersection of business and humanity. I know that he loves stories of purpose and impact, and perhaps he'll be able to share one or two of those very briefly with us. But we sort of have a pact. We had an exchange in the chat because I was very curious about a reference on his website that sounded like something that perhaps we might want to engage in as an association. Starfish hunting. So Lawrence, that is, we always learn something new from our conversations with our WAAS colleagues, but this will certainly be one that we will all benefit from. And chances are none of us have this in our current vocabulary, let alone our things to do list. So if we were going to add starfish hunting to our list of things to do, what would we need to think about? Thanks very much.
What a great setup, Isabella. And thank you, Ambassador O'Donnell, for your remarks and your comments that will line up to some of my prepared remarks around artificial intelligence and the depth of the root causes that we're up against today. And thank you for the World Academy of Art and Science, and of course, my friend Gary Jacobs for this wonderful leadership, and the rest of the fellows, and Arizona State University, bringing us together at a time to act and think deeply together at a time that is more important than ever, that has been stated so well by so many of you already on this call. We'll get to starfish. I'm gonna leave that to the end and leave everybody on the edge of their seats. But it does absolutely align with what I'm going to be speaking about today and what I think is the most important. And what I'd like to offer this morning is really not a conclusion, but a lens and a perspective, a context, a theory of the root causes in the situation itself. As we've talked about so much here, not symptoms, but a possible solution, getting towards the root causes that I hope invites really meaningful dialogue among us as we begin this discussion and this leadership around this future collaboration with everyone as we come together to lead the world into this next age. And I'll share my remarks in three parts with perspective as the key. 3 points I want to make here. One is that we are entering a new age. The second is we are living through what I call a third season. And the third is we have a chance right now to redefine meaning itself at the core issue. So let me first talk about we're entering a new age. Let's start with, throughout history, the way that we've defined value has shaped the world we live in. First came the age of what I call the physical, when value came from land, labor, strength, and survival. Then we evolved into the age of knowledge, where information became our primary currency. We built entire systems, education, economics, governance around who knew what and how fast they could deliver it. But now that age is ending, and not quietly. AI is not just another tool, it is fundamentally shifting the source of value. When we once asked our fathers, specifically my dad, who was a brilliant scientist, it always used to be in our household, "Hey, Dad." And unfortunately for my dad, that quickly got displaced with "Hey, Google," during his lifetime while he was still alive. And now we're moving to "Hey, AI." And with that transition, something deeper is being displaced, our very identity. When machines can do what we used to define ourselves by, the question becomes, what's left for us? And this shift, combined with a changing global order that many of you were speaking of, growing unrest, the visible strain of aging institutions, tells me one thing: we're not just in disruption, we're in transition. And it's moving at unprecedented pace. AI no longer follows Moore's law. It's eating it for lunch. Today, our capabilities are doubling every 3.4 months. That's not evolution, that's an exponential leap. And if we don't evolve our inner architecture to match that curve, we will amplify the very flaws that got us here at scale and at speed. And so that brings me to my second is we're entering a new age, and we're entering an age in through the third season. Third season is a definition of what I framed in my first book, which was called The Secrets of the Seasons. All of us know this at a personal level. If we've been around the world long enough, we know that there comes a time in our life where we get our, I think the technical term would be our asses kicked. And it wakes us up and helps us remember maybe who we are and why we're really here on this earth. And if we're aware and conscious enough, then personally we come back to more of who we are and shift our perspective and get back more on purpose. And I know, because I know many of the leaders on this call, we've been refined through those processes in life, which brings our gifts today forward with power and clarity. But these transitions that are happening now are not happening in a vacuum. This is the first time in history that we are all in this together. This is a global third season. And COVID was just a warm-up as well as an example of how we are all in this together in our beautiful planet. What we do in this age decides the future like never before. Every age ends with turbulence. We know that through history. What I call third season, a time of collapse, awakening, reflection, and redefinition. A time when we're asked collectively not just to respond, but to reimagine. And that's exactly where we are now. Yes, it's volatile, but what if this isn't a breakdown? What if it's a breakthrough in disguise? And for me personally, I can't help but being more excited about being alive during this time. I think it is a fascinating gift to be here with all of our skills to be able to help guide us through this next transformation. But the only way I know how to do that is to look deeper, because beneath the headlines and the symptoms, AI, acceleration, climate risk, economic fragility, there's a repeating root cause. There's a bug in the system. In earlier times, it served us. In the age of physical, fear controlled and helped us survive. That wiring passed down through the generations was a feature. It actually helped us be here today. But now, in a world of exponential tools and global interconnection, that same feature has become a bug. It leads us to hoard, to dominate, to repeat the same power cycles that have collapsed empires through histories. As Lord Acton said so perfectly, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we are entering an age of absolute capability without evolving our consciousness to match it. That's the risk, but also the opportunity, because once we see the flaw, we can redesign around it. That's the gift of every third season. We've been here before, but the stakes have never been so high, or tools this powerful. And the magnitude of this disruption is giving us the gift not to be able to continue on the same path, because everything is changing. So we must embrace a new form of meaning. And that's what I'm proposing here today. Because while we may carry a bug in our system, we also carry a profound gift. Humans are meaning-making machines. That's what set us apart from every other species. It's what allowed us to create shared myths, systems, science, language, and religion, and economies. It's the reason we got this far. And now it may be the reason we move forward. Because if meaning is what shaped us, then perhaps meaning is what can reshape our systems. As the shamans say, it's a time to dream a new dream into being. And interestingly, science is starting to match the seers. Quantum physics is now exploring what wisdom traditions have long understood, that consciousness shapes reality, that the observer matters, that we are not passive within the system. We are participants in this creation. So what if our new dream started here? What if we began to measure value, not just how much we produce, but why we produce it? What if we evolved from GDP to GD purpose? A metric that doesn't just count, but cares, that tracks alignment, that rewards contribution, not just consumption. And this isn't just a philosophical shift. It's an economic one. GD purpose could offer a grounded, practical upgrade to our existing systems of capital. It doesn't require dismantling markets. It inserts a new signal, a purpose signal, into the mechanism we already use. It creates a tool that can shift behavior through how we define and reward value. The famous Buckminster Fuller reminds us, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes existing models obsolete. So GD purpose is not escape from capitalism, it's a lever within it. Designing a tool, its use changes the consciousness by itself. In closing, I'll share these ideas with hope and come back to the starfish, Isabella. So what if we greeted each other as beings who had purposeful, beautiful gifts, that we are all here for a reason? And we know that when people that we know are living on purpose, they have inner peace. And when more of us do it, we move towards world peace. And what if we went starfish hunting and we went out and actually looked for those people who were living their genius and had the solutions in the world? Because we know they're there, they just need to be discovered, empowered, and amplified. And so, Isabella, to answer your question, at the foundation, that's what we do, is we go starfish hunting and we highlight the beautiful people in the world who are living their purpose and have the world's solutions, so they can be empowered not only through capital, but also through collaboration, which is something that the world is calling us towards today. So thank you for the time, and thank you for everybody for being here to align on this such important, critical, amazing time to be alive. And I'm so honored and humbled to be a small part of this group, to be able to help navigate this change forward for our species.
Lawrence, thank you so much. I mean, you brought in the teleological, you brought in the optimistic, you've transcended the international, really moving to intergalactic, and you are in many ways proposing a new paradigm for the entire economic system and all of that represents for humanity. And I know also from some of the comments in the chats, this is a very inclusive model. Someone from China was commenting, well, what about commenting on our state of affairs and our own concerns in the system? So I think this is something that's very inclusive as well. It goes to the point that was also made about including women, including the next generation. So I'm really grateful for those very profound remarks.